No COVID-19 bailouts for firms that use tax havens, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says. Fair. If a corporation does not pay tax, it does not receive a benefit that funded by taxes. If they can identify with confidence which companies are abusing tax havens, why abide it at all? Why not just fine these companies every year to offset the money they should be paying in taxes? The Liberals backpedaled on their initial refusal after pressure from the Bloc, NDP and Green parties. So much for the theory that minority governments are ineffective. The intention for not doing this earlier was correct. However, it clearly wasn't as big of a deal, which is why the parties were able to negotiate to get to this point. It's not so much backpedaling as it is negotiating to a new outcome. The employees that will undoubtedly be laid off by these companies will be taken care of either way, which is why the parties were able to negotiate to this move. The intention to save those jobs was noble. The fact that parties are able to work together and negotiate is even more noble. Edit. Fix spelling mistake. Glad you got on this, Canada. Eventually. Earlier last week our Prime Minister said he had no problems bailing out tax haven core, but our minority government pressured him and he backpedaled. Finally, it's about time. It looks like the government is actually doing something smart for a change. Oh fuck, it's Canada. Americans. The US killed oversight on their bailouts. They're getting misappropriated as hell. Fuck yes. I wrote my MP about this the day the news came out. I feel like I won a thing. I won a thing. Edit. Neat. Make a happy comment while a little baked. Wake up to a destroyed inbox. I appreciate all the positive comments. Let's all keep writing to our local politicians and influencing the change we want to see. You did more than 99% of us. Not only did you win a thing, you made a difference. Can Canada collect from all those folks named in the Panama Papers? No, because implicated in those papers are a fair number of prominent LPC insiders such as our Finance Minister Bill Morneau, former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, among others, and former Cons Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. The CRA has recovered a pittance of the 900 Canadians identified in the papers. Something like $15 million total, with no charges leveled. The CRA is a bad joke, toothless and incompetent. If you are wealthy, evade taxes, lie, cheat, steal from society, and exhibit the means to defend yourself, what I've learned is that Revenue Canada is a dog with a tail between its legs. I still think he was an asshole for saying tax shelter companies should be supported, but I'm even more happy that we live in a country where politicians are encouraged and rewarded for changing their minds as they receive more data, as opposed to our southern neighbors where it is viewed as hypocrisy and therefore no one does it. His initial message was that the CDN employees of tax shelter companies should not suffer for the sins of their employers. His intention was right, but the implementation was questionable. The other parties forced the change if there was going to be support for funding, which is the way most Canadians wanted it, and therefore the way government should always function in a representative democracy. Minority governments are almost always the best for this country. It's gonna be funny when all the non-corrupt governments do this, then the UK Tory party will just be like, but my brother's company uses offshore accounts, grimacing face, and all our investors, grimacing face, own me, my shares in various companies, grimacing face, grimacing face, grimacing face. Well, that is a complete 180 from what he said a couple days ago. Guess minority governments have their advantages as this change was largely pushed by the NDP, Bloc and Green Party. Wonder how this will sit with the large corporate interests the LPC is close to. Heck, even the Minister of Finance is all tied up in offshore tax havens, former Liberal Prime Ministers. Sitting MPs. Wouldn't be surprised if Trudeau himself. There is a reason they haven't pushed the issue of closing the loopholes, or pursuing the tax avoidance by Canadian corporations and damp, wealthy individuals. The one thing that makes me optimistic is that I feel like our country will be somewhat mended from its current division after this. I'm very left, but I think Doug Ford is doing well on this situation. I also think Trudeau is. I've met more than a solid number of Conservative voters who are somewhat changing their tone on Trudeau. Conversations have been more rational. The unity with how our parties are working is just really good to see, and when we see the other side of this, I hope that's maintained. Please don't get fooled, 99.9% chance it's a hoax just like for us in France. They had a non-exhaustive list of tax haven and were only taking into account HQ and subsidiaries, not holding nor more elaborated schemes. It's just about calming down the crowds. This comment should be higher. France's government made this announcement about not bailing out companies which are in tax havens. It made headlines. Then they backpedaled. I saw it only in one small news outlet. Since this is r/World News, and there are probably a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the policial dynamics of Canada, I just wanted to catch people up that our parliament is a minority government led by the Liberal Party. Nearly every good thing you've heard about what our country is doing during this pandemic, $2,000 per month, it being expanded to students, this, etc., was the result of the NDP, and to a lesser extent, the Green and Bloc parties, putting pressure on the Liberal government. Of course the main opposition, the Conservatives, have been squabbling over the most inane things and mom about all of this. To sum it up, most of the positive things we're hearing about is due to the NDP's excellent work at putting pressure on our government. Let's not forget that. Here's the thing that confuses me about this. On one hand, these people hate socialism like it kidnapped their unborn child. But on the other hand, they want the government to save them. Like, if you get such a hard-on for free market capitalism, let these bitches sink. Why pick and choose when you want the government to step in? US, I'm looking at you. Props to Canada though. Here in Canada, the so-called socialism approach is not seen as the devil himself. Most Canadians don't complain about the fact that their tax money goes to help the greater good and gives you a security when you need it. Speaking as a fellow French Canadian myself. You all got room? An American. I think technically we do. But I've heard it's not easy to immigrate here. I'm sorry you're American.